to this gubernatorial panel discussion. We're very pleased and excited to have 5 of the 7 major Democratic candidates running for governor here today, and we thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to come here to our community college to talk to us. So let's give them a round of applause, please. This is a bipartisan event. We did invite Governor Hogan. He declined, so just wanted to make that point. Before I introduce the candidates, I want to say a few words about how this event came to be. We have a union for the part-time faculty here on this campus, at this college. In fact, we're the only part-time faculty in the state of Maryland who have a union. So, and we're hoping that will change. We've been trying for a while to get a collective bargaining bill through the Maryland legislature, and we hope that with a new Democratic governor that will change as well. I'm Victoria Baldassano. I've been teaching English here for 12 years at this campus. And we decided some months ago that we wanted to hear the gubernatorial candidates for Maryland address issues of critical importance to education in Maryland. We thought it would help enlighten us, but also encourage our students to get more involved in the political process. So the part-time faculty union here and the Student Senate joined together to host this event. So I want to stop that for a minute, and I want to have Leo Elias come up and talk a little bit about the Student Senate and make a few remarks. Does
this work? Yes. All right. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for everyone for being here today. My name is Leo Elias. I am the president of the Student Senate here at the Takoma Park Silver Spring campus. I am here today with partnered with the Takoma Park Part-Time Union Forum for this special event for Ask the Candidate Governors Forum. As you may all know, this is a very special year since it's a midterm elections, the gubernatorial elections, and it is really important both educationally for Montgomery County students, the Montgomery County residents, and the state of Maryland as a whole. I'm excited to see some Montgomery College students here, as this is important to discuss many issues that go on in community colleges, whether they are financial need, our DACA students, our TPS students, and all students in general. And I'm so excited to see what is to come today. So I'm excited to see everyone, their questions that you may ask. And just thank you so much for being here today.
I want to say thank you really quickly to Leo and to Rashani Ward-Williamson in the red in the front here, who worked so hard to put this event together, and all the part-time faculty people who helped as well, including Heather Brown, who's standing in the back. I am going to go over ground rules really quickly, and then I'm going to introduce the candidates. So there'll be 5 minutes for each person to speak on general issues of education. Then we'll have questions and answers. I have some prepared questions here from part-time faculty. We'll take questions from the audience, and Rashani is handling Twitter questions. So we're going to go back and forth. There is so much experience in this room, and we are so thrilled to have such distinguished people that my bio introductions are going to be really short. And during your 5-minute spiel, you can say whatever you want about your background. And I'm not going to go in any particular order. Krish Vignaraja is here. She's the only female candidate for governor. She served in the Obama White House as policy director for First Lady Michelle Obama, and at the State Department as senior advisor under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Secretary of State John Kerry. And she is sitting at the very end. Vangelis sitting next to me, civil rights leader, community organizer, former president and executive director of the NAACP. He's partner at Kapor Capital, board chairman of the Southern Elections Fund, and one of the John L. Wannenberg Goldman Sachs visiting professors at Princeton University. Senator Rich Madaleno, the first openly gay person elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in the Maryland State Senate, is sitting next to Ben. He served in elective office since 2002. He's been at the forefront of every LGBT policy victory in Maryland for the last 20 years. Julie Verratti is sitting next to him. She's co-founder and director of business development at Denison's Brewing Company and former presidential management fellow and senior policy advisor at the U.S. Small Business Administration. She is running for lieutenant governor with the gubernatorial candidate Alec Ross, who was formerly senior advisor for innovation to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And finally, Elizabeth Embry is here. She's running for lieutenant governor with the candidate Rushern Baker, who has served as Prince George's County executive for 2 terms and state delegate for 3 terms. Ms. Embry is the former chief of the criminal division under Attorney General Brian Frosch and former candidate for mayor of Baltimore. So I am just going to open it for each candidate to make a statement, starting with you, Mr. Jellis.
Gotta get closer to this mic. Oh, there you go. Well, good afternoon. My name is Ben Jellis, former national president of the NAACP, civil rights organizer. The only candidate up here who's already been arrested outside of Trump's White House. I was there to defend the Dreamers. If you want to make Trump's blood pressure go up, send a civil rights leader to be your next governor. I'm running for governor to make sure that we finally fully fund our schools. My mom sued Western High School for girls, and she was 12, in Baltimore to desegregate it when she was 15. We've known since then, until we fully fund our schools, none of our other theories of education actually work right. I'm running for governor to finally put an end to the killing of unarmed civilians by the police, to end mass incarceration, put a plan on the table to cut the bloated criminal justice system that we have and save $660 million in the process. Just like I worked with the governor of Georgia and a bipartisan array of leaders in Texas to help cut their prison systems by about 30% over the last 3 years. I'm the only candidate up here with a plan to make sure that everybody in our state finally has health care. We get the costs under control by moving to a single-payer, state-based Medicare for all system. Folks will tell you that the things that I want to do are hard. I'm an organizer. I specialize in hard. I was named Marylander of the Year by the Baltimore Sun because in 1 year I led the successful effort to abolish the death penalty in Maryland just a few years after the sitting governor himself had tried and not succeeded. Co-chaired the campaign to pass the DREAM Act in our state. We won that too. And I put organizers on the ground to help folks like Rich win the battle for marriage equality. We have an opportunity here to get our state back to moving forward again. In order to do it, we're going to have to do what we've done every time that have helped us win a big battle, which is come together, build a big, robust coalition, frankly bigger than many folks think is possible. I'm proud to have been endorsed by every major environmental group that's endorsed somebody so far, almost every major progressive group, and almost every major union, including the teachers who endorsed me just over the weekend, 74,000 teachers in 23 counties. This campaign is a movement, and at the center of it is finally doing right by the students of our state. When it comes to education in Maryland, we don't have a money problem in this, the richest state, the richest country, in the richest country on the planet, as much as we have a priority problem. They promised us, K through 12 education, for example, they promised us that the casino money and the lottery money would be used to significantly fund education for the students in our schools. It didn't happen. Played games. I've got 2 kids in the public schools. I'm tired of watching them play games. We've watched for almost a half century now, since about 1970, as spending on incarceration has ticked up. Spending on public higher education has trended down. Tuition's gone up, debt's gone up, default rates have gone up. The president of Penn State said to me once, when I said, "What's your biggest leadership challenge?" He said, "Oh, it's like Groundhog Day every year. Every year I go up to the state capitol, try to keep so much more money from going to the state pen. Just a little more can come to Penn State." I'll tell you one thing, when my granddad went to the University of Maryland School of Law, late 1950s for 1 year. Helped lift our family out of poverty, and it was possible because the tuition was $200. By 1970, it was $400. If we kept up with tuition today, it'd be $2,600. It's actually more than $31,000. We can do much better by our students. We've got to have the courage to come together and actually put whole solutions on the table. Stop the nibbling around the edges. And certainly stop the efforts to get back to the days of mass incarceration here in Maryland. This bill that Governor Hogan helped push through, state senators voted for, Democrats, one next to me, voted for, added new mandatory minimums. You know the funny thing? When I say that it's time for us to get back to our universities being tuition free, again, that $200 my granddad paid was just a fee. They demand to know the price right away. Well, we'll put out that plan. When it comes to getting back to mass incarceration, passing new mandatory minimums, you don't demand to know the price. I'm tired of the days of us demanding to know the price every time we want to educate more of our kids, and not asking the price when we want to lock up more of our kids. That bill that just passed, after they made amendments, there was no new fiscal note. When I'm governor, not only will we be clear about the price we're spending on mass incarceration, every time that a judge gives a new sentence, we will make sure that they say what the cost will be to the state. Because the reality is that we're spending millions upon millions to lock up people's parents, breaking up families unnecessarily to look tough, rather than doing what works and what's effective. If somebody's a criminologist who's inspired by his granddad who served in law enforcement for 30 years in Baltimore City, what I know is that law enforcement is like everything else. You do what works. You don't do what makes you feel good. And it turns out that what works costs less than what we're doing right now. So as governor, you can plan on me to get our priorities straight in the days of mass incarceration, in the days of massive student debt, and get back to investing in what works. Putting education first works. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rich Madaleno, and for the last 16 years, I've had the honor of representing this community in the Maryland General Assembly, first in the House and then the Senate. I'm actually a Silver Spring native, grew up in White Oak and then further out towards Cloverly, so I've spent my entire life here. I'm proud to have been one of the people that worked to turn this corner of Georgia Avenue into facilities for Montgomery College. For those of you who've been around for a while, this was a bakery at one time for Giant Foods. And we were able to get this facility purchased and then transformed so that we could grow a huge new community college on this site and expand what was once a smaller facility at Takoma down the street. So I've had an honor of being the go-to person for this county to work on getting money for our facilities for growing Montgomery College in all 3 campuses. I'm the vice chair of the Budget and Taxation Committee. I've been helping to lead the effort in the state to have a strong, progressive budget that invests in education and transportation and healthcare, in doing some of the things that you heard Mr. Jealous talk about. So, with me as your governor, you're going to see investments in actually moving education forward. You're going to see investments in making progress in healthcare. You're going to see initiatives that can get through the General Assembly that will improve the lives of the people of Maryland. I'm proud to have been endorsed by our incredible congressman and neighbor down the street, Jamie Raskin, and dozens of other local elected officials, because they know I have what it takes to actually govern in the state of Maryland because of my experience. I was thrilled that Ben joined our effort to pass marriage equality, but that was an effort that went on for years when people said it was inevitable and I helped make it, people said it was impossible and I helped make it inevitable. We were working on the DREAM Act for years trying to make sure we could get it through, and it was great that Ben came on board for the referendum and to lead the fight to get the referendum done. But there are those of us who've been working in the legislature trying to make progress for years and actually succeeding, because it is hard work year in and year out trying to get it done. Believe it or not, for those of you who don't know this, the governor of the state of Maryland is the most powerful governor in the country. Our state constitution reserves more authority for our governor than any other state constitution. Our governor has a special role to play in setting the agenda for the state. If the governor doesn't put the money in the budget, the legislature can't put it in. The governor appoints everybody, the state school board, all of the judges, all of the cabinet officials, everyone but the attorney general and the comptroller. All the regulations that run and power state government all come from the executive branch. It matters who the governor of the state of Maryland is. And at this moment, at this challenging time with Donald Trump in the White House, with the Republicans controlling Congress, it matters more than ever that we have a strong, progressive, Democratic governor who actually can get things done for the people of the state of Maryland, who's interested in making progress for the people of the state of Maryland. And that's what I offer, because I have an unparalleled track record of actually getting things done in Maryland state government. Look, when you come into office, you've got to govern with 188 members of the legislature. It's helpful to have the relationships with the people that you're going to be tasked with working with, to helping to govern. I have those relationships. I have the firsthand knowledge to know why we are in the situation that we're in. I know where the money is coming from the state budget and where it's going. I have an appreciation and respect for state employees. I'm the person who can help move Maryland forward the fastest as your governor. I'm running with LaWanda Jenkins, a longtime friend and colleague, a former member of the cabinet under Governor O'Malley. Between the two of us, we have 16 years of legislative experience as an elected official. She has 17 years of senior executive service in our state. Together we have, I think, the most experienced team that has ever run for governor and lieutenant governor in our state, and we are ready to lead. LaWanda was the Secretary of Minority Affairs. She ran the state's small minority and women-owned business program. We have a vision for how to move our economy forward by growing businesses here and helping especially small businesses like Julie's, grow and prosper as the backbone of our economy. I look forward to answering your questions, and I look forward to having a spirited conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Julie Veratti. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor with Alec Ross. Alec is sorry he can't be here today. He had a long-standing commitment that he could not change. So you guys are stuck with me. So I know that we're supposed to talk a little bit about education, and I do also just want to say that I am, as a lifelong Democrat, I am so proud of the tickets that are running for governor and lieutenant governor on our side. I think that there's a plethora of experience across the board here, and it's I'm proud to be a Democrat and be a part of this. So I just wanted to say that it's an honor to be up here with all of you guys. You know, I'm actually a former Montgomery College student. I spent a couple years in Montgomery College when I got out of high school. Made the decision to do that because, you know, financial reasons. I couldn't necessarily afford to go to 4-year school right out of high school. I also wasn't, quite frankly, sure what I wanted to do with my life when I grew up, and I didn't want to spend and borrow money at a level that was so astronomical, trying to figure that out. And I had an incredible experience being a student at Montgomery College. I was able to take so many different classes. The professors were unbelievable and so talented. And I was able to actually, when I went on to 4-year school, I actually found that some of the classes I took at Montgomery College were actually a lot more challenging than even some of the classes I took at, you know, a 4-year institution later on. I was also lucky enough to play on the soccer team here and the tennis team. We actually brought a national championship. The women's tennis team brought it in 2001, which was pretty exciting. And so I understand from a very real personal experience how important schools like Montgomery College are and how important community colleges are for our community, to help people get on their feet and start their careers and start their lives after leaving high school. You know, I want to talk a little bit about Alec as well. You know, he is actually a former public school teacher, and his wife is currently a public school teacher and has been for a number of decades. All 3 of his kids are in public schools in Baltimore. And really, you know, he's running for governor because education is his #1 issue. You know, in terms of K through 12 education, a lot of people don't know this, but only 40% of public schools in Maryland actually teach computer science. 40% in 2018. That is a serious problem, and it's something that we need to address. And that's going to be a top priority for Alec and me, assuming we win the nomination, we're able to beat Larry Hogan in the fall. So K through 12 education is huge. I think fully funding our schools, as well as making sure that we are hiring more teachers, and I will say not just more teachers, but hiring more teachers who are people of color. And I think that that is really important to do in our state. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of Malcolm Gladwell, but he's done a lot of research on this and talked a lot about this. And I think there's a lot of things that we can learn and we can apply in our state in terms of creating more opportunities for people. I think in terms of community colleges, we need to be taking advantage of the programs that we have here and fully funding them and creating more opportunities to work with the private sector. I can tell you as a small business owner, hiring folks, trying to find people who have vocational skills. I own a brewery or a manufacturing company. We need to hire welders, we need to hire electricians, we need to make sure that we're hiring plumbers, people who work with their hands. And there's so much more opportunity that we can create by using our community colleges in our state. And I actually, my team and I just took a class with Montgomery College a couple weeks ago to learn how to drive big box trucks. We were able to use Montgomery College as a resource in order to do that. And as a small business owner, being able to have opportunities like that for my team was really important. And so the other thing that I want to talk about, and then I will turn it over, is student loan debt. This is something that I deal with on a daily basis. I don't know about you guys, but I have tons and tons of student loan debt. This is, again, something that I have real experience with. And student loan debt follows you for the rest of your life, right? I graduated college a long time ago. I owe so much money in student loan debt that it's actually doubled because of the interest that compounds every single year. It is something that we need to address, and there's opportunities we can do at the state level. Why aren't there tax credits and tax deductions for student loan repayment for people? You can do it on the federal level. Why don't we have that opportunity on the state level? I think there are things that Maryland can do. We've invested in our education. We've borrowed this money. We're trying to make our lives better and contribute to the state. The state should really be backing people up and helping them move forward. I was almost not able to open Denizens Brewing Company because of the amount of student loan debt that I had. When I was applying for business loans, that was a conversation I had to have with banks because they were nervous about lending the money because I had so much student loan debt. Luckily, I have other business partners, so we were able to actually get the funding. But this is not a unique situation. Student loan debt impacts everything from whether people can afford to live here, whether they can afford to work here, and whether if they want to start their own businesses. Think about how many more businesses could be started by folks if we didn't have so much crippling student loan debt. So those are just some of the issues that Alec and I want to work on. Hopefully we have your support, and I'm looking forward to hearing what other people have to say. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Embry, and I am the running mate of Rashawn Baker. I have a different kind of debt to community college. My mother, right after getting her master's in sculpture in New York, her first teaching job she got was at the Community College of Baltimore City. And she thought she was going to come down, teach for a few years, go back to New York. She never left, which I'm very grateful for. She met my father in Baltimore City, and she raised 4 daughters there, all of whom are proud, very proud graduates of the public school system in Baltimore City. And I have spent my career in public service, mostly in Baltimore City, but also at the state level. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a deputy state's attorney, I've worked in criminal justice reform, working for the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I've worked in workforce development at the Department of Labor of Maryland, and I've also been a lawyer for the city, involved in virtually every policy area you can imagine. And the most recent job I had is maybe the most fun job of all, a sort of dream job. I ran the criminal division for the Attorney General's office, Brian Frosch specifically. I came to work for him because I'm such a fan of his. And it was such a great job because we had statewide jurisdiction. Brian Frosch, as you know, is independently elected, so we're not limited by what the governor's agenda or lack of agenda was. And we took on issues like the opiate epidemic, going after pill mills, looking at ways to help the public health system to do better, to provide better treatment and to provide better crisis response. We created an organized crime unit so we could go after corruption and crime in the prison system, a rampant problem, as I'm sure you know, in the state of Maryland, and had some really good successes. We created or focused on crimes against vulnerable populations, the elderly in nursing homes, the disabled in group homes, and the Attorney General's office really is the place that represents the voiceless victims across the state. That is something that we do in every jurisdiction across the state. We have an environmental crimes unit going after polluters, tax fraud, procurement fraud, you name it. It was an incredible job. And I say it because I left that job, I had to leave the job, and I did it with great joy and no regrets because of how deeply I believe in Rashern Baker. And the first thing that we connected on and talked about was education, because it is a passion we both share. And Rashern Baker, who has been, well, let me go even further back. Rashern Baker was a military child. His father was in the Green Berets. Rashern was also the first person in his family to go to college. But he didn't get there easily. He struggled a lot with reading and was kicked out of school. Because they traveled so much, he was often a grade behind. And it wasn't until a teacher in high school finally connected to him that he really understood the importance of education, and then went on to Howard for undergrad and law school. But public education has been a priority for him. His children have all been students in the public school system in Prince George's County. And he has, both because he cares deeply about the students in the county, but also because he cares about his own students, he's made education his top priority as county executive. And what does it mean to say it's your top priority, right? Everyone, I think you won't find anyone in this race who doesn't say education is their top priority. Well, what Rashern did is he said, I'm going to fund education first. I'm going to do that first, and everything else I'll figure out. But the first thing I'm going to do at the county level is fund education. And at the state level, we're going to do the same. We will make a full commitment to the funding recommended by Kirwan and the Knott commissions. Those are the two entities currently studying what is the appropriate and adequate and sufficient level of funding for students in the state of Maryland. It's funding it first and saying everything else we'll figure out, but we're going to make sure our students get first priority. He's done a lot of things. He's also devoted his life to public service, from community development to years in the legislature, focused especially on appropriations and how you develop a budget, how you get bills passed, and then 8 years as county executive. And what many of you may or may not know is that Prince George's County 8 years ago, when he took office, was not in great shape. It was, that's to say the least. The county executive before him had been federally indicted. There was an FBI investigation. Foreclosure crisis hit Prince George's County, as it did Baltimore City, especially hard. Crime was up. Crime from the district was moving into the inner beltway area of Prince George's County. I mean, if you looked at any measure, it was going in the wrong direction. And 8 years later, it's thriving. It's not perfect, but it's thriving. And all the things that were going downwards are now going upwards, leading the state in job growth for the last 5 quarters, going from virtually no real capital investment to over $9 billion and climbing. And that investment has been focused on the neighborhoods that need it the most. And coming from Baltimore City and seeing often the opposite, I put great value in his commitment to saying, I'm going to pick the communities that are the hardest hit, the worst outcomes, the worst health disparities, the lowest the lowest employment, and I'm going to put every extra dollar, I'm going to focus our resources, focus our attention on those communities. He picked 6. He focused development, he brought in subsidies, he focused on creating jobs in those areas, transit-oriented development, developing around transit systems. And he poured every extra penny of county resources into those jurisdictions. And I would argue that's the reason the county is where it is today, why it's thriving, why it's done so much better, why its median income has risen, house prices, job growth, as I said before, is because he focused on the communities that were the hardest hit. And that is what we have to do as a state. We cannot be a successful state in Maryland unless we focus our resources on the communities that need it the most. And coming from Baltimore City, I know exactly what that means. And I know what it means to have a true partner at the state level, a partner who cares about the issues facing all the communities of the state. The final thing I want to say is another thing that Prince George's County was not known for was leading the way on environmental innovation. And now it is 8 years later, also a leader. In fact, the highest recycling and composting in the state, leading the region in clean energy. And one of the many things that Rashern has done is the stormwater mandate, which one of the reasons that Hogan was able to win is he called a federal mandate to have clean water a rain tax, if you may remember. Well, many jurisdictions tried to shy away from it, didn't want to invest. It's basically requiring local communities invest in their stormwater systems to protect the bay and to protect all of our waterways. What Rochelle Baker did more than any other part of the state is said, I'm going to take advantage of this mandate, not just to make our environment cleaner, but to create jobs. And now 80% of the work done improving the stormwater system is done by local minority-owned businesses. So understanding the intersection of environment, education, development, health, all these things, he has proven that over the last 8 years. So I'm incredibly excited to be part of his team, along with people like Brian Frosch and Chris Van Hollen and many others who have endorsed him. But it's really not about endorsements, it's about relationships and the proven ability to get things done. So I'm really excited to answer your questions today. I'm told they're very, very good. So thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you.
So good afternoon. Thank you so much for hosting this incredible forum. Thank you also for giving us 5 minutes for intros, because we normally get a minute or two and I feel like the world is my oyster. So I am going to actually start when I was a baby and go year by year. No. I will actually start when I was a baby. So I was 9 months old when my parents fled a civil war in Sri Lanka and came to America and Maryland. They had no jobs, just $200 in their pockets, and 2 very young kids in their arms, about the same age as actually the young woman who walked out with her poor child, who I felt very poignant in the sense that I have a 9.5-month-old, who is very vocal, particularly in debates and particularly when she hears me. So I definitely felt her pain. But when my parents came to Maryland, they built a life for themselves that made my life, going from Woodlawn High to the White House, possible. And they both became Baltimore City public school teachers. My mom started at Poly, she retired from Oregon State. My father started at Edmondson, went to Frederick Douglass, then went to Southern, ultimately retired last year. He was the oldest public schools teacher in the state of Maryland at the age of 80. And part of my negotiation with him to retire was that if he gave up that full-time job, I would give him another one, which has been my daughter. Which is actually why I fear that come this summer he was going to come out of retirement, because she is perhaps a bit more demanding than even the Baltimore City public school system. I had the opportunity to live the American dream that I think many of you probably feel or experience. I come here as the only woman running for governor, so this is why it is especially delightful to be able to outnumber the guys in a panel. It is the first one that this is true for. But in a state like Maryland, that is described as America in miniature, it is campuses like this that reflect to me the diversity, the richness of our state. I understand that this campus has the richest diversity of any campus along the Eastern Seaboard, that there are 130, 100, and I congratulate. And that matters, because that is the richness, diversity of our state that makes us rich and strong. It is not a vulnerability. It is not what makes America weak. And at a time when I left the White House, we had he who shall not be named enter and denigrate everything that I am proud to be, a woman, a minority, a mom, an immigrant. In fact, it gave me the great honor of having a couple articles titled Donald Trump's Worst Nightmare Runs for Governor. So if you want our orange president to perhaps turn red, it may not just be sending a civil rights leader, but his worst nightmare into the governor's mansion. But I say that in seriousness because this is what we are fighting for. When so many of the issues, preserving the Affordable Care Act, securing our commitments to climate change, making sure we protect workers' rights, dreamers' rights, immigrants' rights, reproductive rights, when so many of those issues are being debated in Washington, and what we get from Annapolis is silence, that is the lack of leadership. So my campaign is not about getting institutional and establishment endorsements. It's a campaign about how do we allow for one of us to truly represent all of us when so many of those issues are being discussed. I had the great fortune, and I adore Elizabeth, I actually knew her even before she ran, but I'll take one issue with what she described as the dream job. I think Michelle Obama's policy director was a dream job in the sense that, I only say that I may have already peaked, but Working in the White House on issues of national importance that were not getting the attention they deserved was a dream job, and it is what we are fighting for today. 2 of our 4 initiatives were focused on education. Reach Higher, which some of you may be familiar with, which is about getting more of our children into 2- and 4-year colleges. Let Girls Learn, which was about getting more of our kids, our girls, to complete their educations. Joining Forces, which was about supporting veterans and their families. And Let's Move, perhaps the funnest of our initiatives, which was about raising our children with healthier, more active lifestyles. Those were bipartisan or nonpartisan issues, and they should have remained that way. And yet, as we were leaving the White House, my responsibility was setting the next administration up in terms of taking on these initiatives. And again, what we got was silence. This is not a time for silence. And that's, for me, why I decided to run, as people approached me and realized that here in Maryland, we have an opportunity to not just fight back, but lead the charge. And so my campaign has not been just about being the opposition or the resistance. It's about being something more than just anti-Trump or anti-Hogan, putting forth an affirmative, positive agenda of what we could actually accomplish. In our lifetimes, we can see the renaissance of Maryland. And so this isn't just about me, this is about you. Because we saw it time and time again, and we certainly saw it most recently in Parkland. Your generation has been leading the charge. But we need a partner in the hallowed halls of power. And that's why I'm running. So my agenda has been focused on 4 areas. Education first and foremost. I'm the only candidate in the field who's the product of Maryland Public Schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. I would literally not be standing or sitting here before you if it weren't for education, and specifically Maryland public school education. But it's also about making sure that we revitalize the economy. Right now, we come in 28th to 33rd in the nation in terms of unemployment rates. Governor Hogan in 2014, he ran on slogans. Now he's got to run on a track record. The third area for me is protecting the environment. Today we rolled out a comprehensive environmental platform to address climate change, the outdoor economy, clean energy, how we protect the Chesapeake Bay, and restoration. But the final piece is about working families. Because when you all graduate from here, or you may be already a part of families that are still struggling. And that's why when I kicked off my campaign, I kicked it off outside of the basement apartment that my parents and my brother and I grew up in. We lived off my father's one income salary of a teacher. We struggled. We went paycheck to paycheck with no room for error. We had about $20 a week for groceries, and yet we still felt rich. But that is the struggle nearly 4 decades later that we face. And that's where I think we have an opportunity. No one's ever going to probably say, thank goodness Donald Trump was elected, but I have seen the electorate more mobilized and electrified than ever before. And so my campaign is about recognizing that there were nearly 300,000 Democrats who didn't show up. Women, minorities, immigrants, and younger voters. I know we're going to cover a lot of the issues, and I'm excited to be here, but I hope you will join us, because what we are trying to do is take a moment and build a movement that will not just change Maryland for the better, but help move America in the direction we need to be headed. Thank you.
So for questions, I have some questions up here, and I would like to hear from you in the audience. Please come down to this mic if you want to have a question, or you can write down on a piece of paper, and Heather Brown, Professor Brown, will collect it for you if you don't want to read it yourself. I'd like to pick up on what Julia Rowley said about student loan debt. It was $1.4 trillion as of the 4th quarter of 2017. And I was thinking, some people have already discussed this. I want to know what you would like to do to reduce student loan debt, but more beyond that, would you consider supporting tuition-free education at community colleges or universities in Maryland? As you know, some states and cities are already doing just that. Why should European countries be able to provide tuition-free? College in the United States is so far behind. So that's my question. Anybody who wants to start?
So, and I just ask, are you
I'm gonna time it, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't know who was timing that.
I totally did not, I totally ignored the time limit for the first part. But, and this part, 2 minutes, please, keep your answer.
Is there a timer over here, so we should be watching?
Okay, that's good. That's what I was looking like.
You can't miss the brother in there.
So I'd be happy to start with this. I'm very proud of my record as a legislator. I'm the one person up here who actually has his name on legislation that gets to this issue. We have a tax credit for people who are paying student loan debt. In fact, you can claim up to $5,000 a year. I just saved you $5,000 a year if you contact the Maryland Higher Education Commission and ask for the program. So we've been making work on that. I was proud in the Senate, we passed a bill just this year to have free community colleges and free job certification program. You heard Elizabeth talk about the Kerwin Commission, which is this commission that is looking at where we move our K through 12 system together. I'm proud to be one of the 8 legislators who is on that commission. You want my plan for education? It's that document, what we're working on to move our state forward. And one of the things that we're working on is having a program where as we move forward, every young person, as you graduate high school, you're gonna be walking away with an associate's degree, you're gonna be walking away with 30 to 60 credits of higher education experience, or you're gonna be walking away with a job certification that allows you to go out and take that job, that computer coding job, that engineer, that plumber, whatever, the jobs that you can get in our economy that actually pay you a living wage, a family supporting wage. We are going to transform our public schools in this state. But it's nice to have ideas, and you have, and I think I've heard Chris say this before, and I love this line, there is radical agreement at this table and in our campaigns about the things we have to do to move ourselves forward. We're Democrats. Yeah. We believe in educational opportunity. We believe in a clean environment. We believe in good infrastructure. We believe in labor rights. We believe in universal health care. What differentiates us is our ability to get these things done in the state of Maryland. You have to take the great ideas, you gotta put them on paper, and you gotta move them to fruition. And what I think I offer beyond my other amazing competitors is a track record of doing that over and over and over on the issues that are important to the people of the state of Maryland. And I think with that, I was hearing a buzzer, so thank you.
Can I speak, or you sure? Okay. Yeah, I love the phrase radical agreement. I will say a couple things. I mean, I'm very excited, Rashern is very excited about the free community college bill. I think that's absolutely long overdue. And I also think we need to ensure that no one is precluded from a 4-year college because they can't afford it. So we have to make that a reality. We also have to make it an education that for now and well in generations to come is an education that people want to have. And at the public school level, education has slipped in the last 4 years from first place to 5th place. And so it's not just about making sure that students can attend without any cost to them, but it's also about investing so that the standards of our educational system do not slip and in fact continue to improve. I just want to add another nuance. One of the issues is the nefarious and very dark world of for-profit colleges and student loan debt providers, the dark side, which, as you know, our president has been made a lot of money off of and is being sued for. And the Attorney General's office, Consumer Protection Division, has been going after that industry. And it would be really great to have a governor who understands those problems and can help not just support the legal actions against those entities, which are bleeding people dry with near impunity, but also having appropriate statutes and regulations to make sure that we are protecting everyone in Maryland from predatory loans and from institutions that are designed really just to milk every dollar out of the students who attend them. So I think that's another piece of this. It's not just making sure that we have great options in the Maryland system, community college and 4-year colleges, but it's also making sure we're protecting Marylanders from the predators in this area. So thank you so much for that question.
So I would just add that, when I launched my campaign, at the core of it was education, and in particular, I did want to make sure Maryland guaranteed free community college. Because the truth is that in Maryland, our financing of community colleges is far out of sync with the demand here in Maryland. We have 200,000 more Marylanders who are in community colleges in terms of continuing education and certificates, and yet we spend 4 times as much state funding on 4-year colleges compared to 2-year colleges. It's nonsensical to me. But part of it also has to be recognizing that education is a societal good in the sense that it improves our economy. Because what it allows for is students to get the skills they need to compete in the economy to actually have them. And so that's where when you see the burden borne by a single individual, where it ultimately benefits our Maryland economy, is why I am the only candidate in the field who also announced 1% student loans. Because the truth is, we should not allow for companies to profiteer off of student loans, and yet they do. And I say that, like Julie, someone who came out of school, not being able to kind of self-finance, but in fact to rely on student loans. When my mother went back to school when she was 62 to get her PhD, she is 80 now, and I believe still paying off her student loans, which is the problem that we put on our citizens in terms of getting a basic tool that allows them to compete. But this is where I think it's important to recognize that legislative experience is not the only experience to want when you're looking for a governor. When I led Let Girls Learn, it was about bringing together, from a seed of an idea, 7 agencies and $1 billion of government funding. But then what I did was leverage taxpayer dollars, because this is how we actually get the most innovative, creative programs that actually get through. So I brought in over 100 private partners and over $3 billion of private capital. That is what we can do. The fact that you see in Kalamazoo, Pittsburgh, community college programs where employers are paying for that is the kind of innovation we need here in Maryland, and that's why I believe I'm the most qualified for this position. Thank you.
We have an opportunity to get our economy really going again, but it means that we have to get rid of student loan debt. What we've done is just not sustainable. You look the last 30 years, student debt's gone up, up, up. Not only has default rates gone up, but new business starts, and you heard Julie talk about the struggle. New business starts have gone down every decade, in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Young people in particular, starting fewer businesses. Why? Because they're deeper in debt. This is, it's great to see we're talking about, stopping predatory loans. The whole student loan finance regime is predatory. The federal government is charging you 7%, but you can get a mortgage for 3.5% or 4%. It's predatory. We have to stop that. We have to have the courage to actually bring down the cost of our universities significantly, not just at the community college level, but the public university level as well. As I said to you earlier, they kept up with inflation. University of Maryland School of Law would be $2,600. It's now $31,000. How much higher do they think it can go up? That's just for the tuition. We have students in this I was at Bowie State. University president shows up at a church nearby to thank the congregation for helping to take in the growing population of homeless students.
Oh my God.
I was in Baltimore City. Recent graduate of University of Baltimore telling me that she opposes shutting down, tearing down vacant houses because she lived in one while she was going to University of Baltimore. And then I have state legislators tell me that because I think our public universities should be tuition free again, it's irresponsible to say that without putting the cost on the table right away. Well, you know what? I wasn't going to do it in October when nobody was watching the race except for state senators. I'll do it next month. But what I'll tell you is this. We've got to end mass incarceration if we're going to cut the cost of higher education. The two things are connected, and I'm the only candidate with a plan on the table to cut mass incarceration in Maryland, and that will make it possible to cut the cost of public higher education, not just at the community college level, but all the way up through that law school that changed my family's life so many years ago.
Thank you. Anyone, further comments?
I mean, I'm not really sure how much I'm going to add. I think a lot of us agree on this here.
And you can cite it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a very obvious problem. The cost of college education is very high, and I do think that there's opportunities to make tuition-free available community college for folks. Yeah, agree with all of you guys, so it's kind of.
Okay. Questions from the audience or Twitter questions?
Oh,
You need to come down to the mic if you have questions.
hi everyone. My question is about, given your focus on finance and education, how do we make sure that that money is spent well, given the history of Dr. Pollard at this college? Dr. Pollard, according to a 2016 News 4 report, has a base salary of $281,000, a $36,000 annual housing allowance. In those 3 years covered in the report, she spent $70,000 on travel, including $6,000 upgrading her seats on planes and $3,500 for overweight luggage. Here, we pay, the Maryland taxpayer pays $45,000 for her personal vehicle, $10,000 for a second vehicle, which then she has someone drive her to the college in. That person has been paid $70,000 between 2013 and 2016. And lastly, she had 40 receipts for a high-end car service between 2013 and 2016. I agree that we need to fund education. How can we hold our administration accountable?
Comments?
You know, as the civil rights student here, I would say you're right to raise those questions. And we really have to look at the structure of public higher education in Maryland in general. Spend a lot of money on new buildings. I mean, you have students who can't find food to eat. Tuitions, going up, and students coming out layered in debt. We have to fundamentally, I think, review something's gone wrong when our public universities are so much more expensive than they should be. When we have so many students who are homeless, when we have students who are food insecure. George Washington's across the border in D.C. There was an article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago about how universities across the country feel embarrassed that their students are so food insecure. There's a food pantry here, but frankly, just about every university in the state needs one. Many of them are afraid to open. I would never discourage you from asking those questions and seeking the answers from the trustees and from the representatives. What I can tell you is that when I'm governor, we will focus our resources on making sure that every young person in Maryland, starting with our public high schools, but already through our community colleges and our public universities, comes out prepared for a career. I'll give you an example. In Maryland, we need 3,000 new construction managers every year. Those jobs quickly get into the 6 figures. Our largest public university program produces less than 2 dozen in any given year. They import most of them from out of state. Secret here in Maryland, it's easy to feel like we have a shortage of young people who are, it's easy to feel like we have a shortage of jobs for our young people in our state. The reality is that we have a shortage of our young people that we've prepared for the good jobs that we have. I'm governor, I'll fix that, and at the heart of that, we'll be making education radically more affordable. We've got to end the debt crisis, and it starts by stopping sending students out in debt by lowering our tuition across the board.
Thank you. There's a question over here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to comment on that?
Yes, because I was troubled when I saw those reports about the spending at this college, and I did discuss it with Dr. Pollard about it, and I think it speaks to the way that executives in higher education have to be reimbursed because we have layered on things like housing payments and car payments, and the rest of us don't live lives like that and have salaries that way, and let's just put it in a salary and pay it, akin to an executive. This is a very large operation, and she has been an outstanding and transformative leader for this campus and for this institution. Sadly, Dr. Pollard went out and spoke forcefully against the radical changes that are coming out of the White House, the hatred and bigotry that Donald Trump has stood out for. She took that on, spoke up at events, spoke out publicly, and she got death threats for that. She got attacked on Facebook, on social media, and the campus had to respond for her protection. I am thrilled that we have a strong, amazing leader like Dr. Darian Pollard, who can go out, stand up forcefully out as an African-American lesbian, wear it proudly, stand up for all of you, no matter where you're from, whatever your immigration status, and take on that bigotry in our community. I'm proud that she did it, and I'm proud that we had the resources to help protect her and her family for doing that. And that is an important and beneficial good for our community. And I'm proud to call her a friend and a neighbor in Montgomery County.
Thank you.
All right, I have a Instagram question. How do you plan to bring more business and industry to our state in order to grow jobs if you are elected governor?
We've got to invest across the board. One of the things that I want to make sure we do is invest in infrastructure. So that is everything from transportation solutions that recognize that we have literally the worst commutes in the country. That every year Marylanders spend about $1,500 in lost wages and wasted gas, not even taking into account the time that you're losing with friends and family, and the fact that transportation is now the largest producer of carbon emissions. But it's got to be more than that, right? It's got to be about recognizing that in Maryland, we do not have universal high-speed broadband. 1 in 12 Marylanders still do not have access to the internet. And so while jobs and having access to them in terms of transportation is critically important, part of it is recognized that in 2018, many of these jobs can come to people, particularly in the remote areas of our state where we need the job creation the most. But part of it is also recognizing that we need to expand the biotech, the cybersecurity, and the IT industries and corridors in our state. And that means recognizing that we have many of the right ingredients in our state. We have the second highest number of graduate degrees in Maryland. We have the largest number of federal dollars spent on science research. We have world-class universities like this campus, College Park, UMBC, Johns Hopkins. And yet we get 0.5% of venture capital funding. We come in 28th to 33rd, 28th when it comes to incubators and supporting startups. And that's where, when it comes to small businesses, I am not quite the businesswoman that Julie is, but when I came out of the White House, I started a small business called Generation Impact. It was sort of, as I was working on many of the issues that I continued to work on after I came out of the administration in terms of education, women and girls initiatives, and sustainability. And I realized that, living in Montgomery County, we make it hard to do business. What we need to do is, instead of getting in the way of business, we need to support businesses. And that means making sure government operates at the rate of business, making sure we reduce the duplication and redundancy when it comes to regulations. Because there's a lot of business owners out there who want to do the right thing, who want to grow jobs, and yet they find it burdensome because we have a range of disincentives in terms of investing in equipment. And that's why we end up losing businesses and people to Virginia in places like Loudoun County or to Delaware. But this is where we also have to hold Governor Hogan accountable, because he talks about Maryland being open for business. But the truth is, we now went from 4 to 3 businesses as a result of the loss of discovery. And that's where we have a real opportunity to actually turn things around.
The real reason that Prince George's County under Richard Baker has led the state in job growth is a few things, and Krishanti hit on them. Number one is understanding transit, and understanding you need people that need to be able to get to jobs, number one. So investing in transit-oriented development so people live near transportation options. Another is creating an investment fund for small businesses. So he created an investment fund in Prince George's County for businesses to access for venture capital. It's been wildly successful and will be expanded at the state level. It's also about understanding your assets, understanding what do we have in Maryland. One thing, we have federal agencies and all the industries, whether it's cyber, whether it's defense, understanding what are these industries and how do we support growth in those industries and all the businesses that grow out of them. And one of the ways to do that is to create pathways through the educational system. So to make sure that a student who's in high school understands exactly what they need to do to get a job, a career, not just a job, but a career. And working with all of the systems, the high schools, the community colleges, the four-year programs, apprenticeship programs, et cetera, to make sure that every student in high school knows how to get to where they need to go and their options. And the final thing is, is making sure that we have figured out all the other pieces, like making sure that we have a permitting process is rational, so that businesses want to come and do business, making sure that we have healthcare, adequate healthcare, so that employees want to, that a CEO wants to move their business or start their business in Maryland because they know that their employees will like living there. They'll have options, they'll have healthcare, great neighborhoods, livable neighborhoods. So understanding all of those pieces and how they fit together, I think has been critical to the success in Prince George's County and would be critical to the success for the state of Maryland.
Thank you.
So I think that in Maryland and Montgomery County as well, there unfortunately is this culture of lack of customer service when businesses are interacting with the government. I can tell you from my personal experience that is the case. I think that there needs to be a cultural shift, and that businesses need to be celebrated. I think there needs to be more encouragement of buying local. There is a salad dressing company that is headquartered in Montgomery County. Because of the way that the regulations are set up in our state, she actually has to manufacture her product in Wisconsin. And she is not able to sell it to Montgomery County Public Schools, but she sells it to DC schools, she sells it to Fairfax County schools. Why are we not, as a state and as a local government, encouraging buying local and making sure we're supporting our local businesses? That's just one example. Gap financing programs are a huge thing. Not every business needs venture capital. Not every business needs, all of these equity investments. Businesses need to be able to have access to capital in traditional loan and financing like that way. One of our biggest, when we were opening our doors at Denizens, we asked for a certain amount of money from the bank. The bank said, well, we're gonna give you half of that. So we needed to figure out a way to get that gap financing. And there weren't a lot of programs that existed in the state of Maryland that were able to help us finance that. And so we struggled for the first couple of years because we had to bootstrap a lot of it and take out a lot of debt on personal credit cards, which is a very high interest rate. There are things that the state can do to help businesses get started and also grow after they've been open for a couple of years. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities that exist that we should be taking advantage of. And those are things that Alec and I are going to be eagle-eye focused on when we're in Annapolis.
Okay, thank you.
I see it a bit differently than most folks. I invest in growing businesses. I've done for the last 4.5 years. Spent 6 months of my life trying to move a factory here from Edmonton, Canada, to a block in Baltimore, 3/4 of which is a public housing project, and 1/4 of which is a brownfield. And we were going to put a vertical farming operation there. They farm inside of steel storage containers. They grow lettuce for the Orthodox Jewish market. The deal fell apart because the cost of healthcare keeps skyrocketing in Maryland. I'm the only candidate up here with a plan to move us to Medicare for All, in part because I know what it will do to unleash entrepreneurialism in our state. We'll do it by getting healthcare costs under control, because finally we will be able to negotiate a better deal with the big pharmaceutical companies. We'll also unleash it, because I'm sure we all, raise your hand if you know somebody who stays in a job they don't like because they got to hold on to their health insurance. Yeah, well, there you go. And similarly, that's why I've been so focused as first candidate to call for making sure that the casino money and the lottery money actually went to increase funding for education. Because what I know is if we properly prepare our kids, we will create a more robust economy, and we will prosper as a state. You can grow by being hoodwinked by the world's richest man into giving him far more money than you'll ever recoup, which is what's on the table right now. Or you can actually grow your economy in a way that's sustainable, which gets me down to startups. We lose about 90% of our startups, cities like Baltimore, our tech startups. They go other places to look for financing. And what we need to do is to actually invest more of our state resources in making it easier to grow businesses here in the state. Part of that is changing the culture, like Julie talked about. Part of that, though, is just simply doubling down on our strengths. We are a place where tech for good is good for Maryland, whether it's curing cancer, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's fighting climate change. We're also a place where inclusion is something that we can build on. Anybody here seen the movie Hidden Figures? And we're like a hidden state. I'm bringing some tech leaders here in a couple of weeks, actually less than that, major tech leaders to look at making Maryland a place where they can expand their companies, build large expansion campuses. Why? Well, in part because in Prince George's County alone, we have 17 times more black programmers than they have in Santa Clara County, where Google and Facebook are headquartered. And they can build a more inclusive workforce here faster than they can anywhere else.
Thank you so much. I know you've been waiting for a while. I have a question I'd like to ask before we go to you, and I'd like you guys to say, give me a yes or no, okay, on this question. Let's just do it like 1 minute or 30 seconds or something.
Well, yes, you like 3 seconds.
Okay. The exploitation of part-time faculty in higher education is a problem. As you may know, adjuncts earn 2 to 3 times less than their full-time colleagues for teaching the same classes under the same expectations. Most have no benefits or job security. The situation at Montgomery College is a bit different because we have a union. Our salaries are better. However, I wouldn't call it necessarily a living wage. Most of us work other jobs, teach at other institutions. So my question is, as governor, would you support pay parity for part-time faculty at community colleges in Maryland that would allow us to earn the same rate as our full-time colleagues for teaching?
Yes, and I'm proud to be endorsed by SEU 500 that represents your part-time faculty. I support pay parity. I also understand there's no way for us to get back to being not just first in the country, but truly first in the world in education, unless we're willing to restore teaching to being a first-class profession. And that means you've got to pay folks and invest in training folks in a way that's equitable and sustainable. So yes.
The answer is yes. I'm proud to have my name on the legislation that helps to do this. It is a huge frustration that it has not passed, and it's one of the reasons why I decided to run, because I've grown tired of seeing smart initiatives not get through the General Assembly. They don't, because we don't often have a governor who's willing to push to get it done, to fight for those things to get done. So my pledge to you as governor is to fight on that. I mean, we're going to have, to go back to your question about community colleges, we're going to have a robust conversation about the future of community colleges and funding, but this has to be on the table to make progress.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Absolutely. My mother, when she joined the faculty at community college in Baltimore City, one of the first things she did was join the organizing group to make sure that she was fighting for higher wages and for better benefits for her colleagues and herself. So it's something I've grown up with, and so it's a very easy yes for both me and Rashawn.
This is that violent agreement that I was talking about. Absolutely. And having been an adjunct myself, you just realize that, time and time again, sometimes employers take advantage of these kinds of loopholes to game the system. And it's just wrong. And as governor, I will put a stop to it.
Thank you so much. Go ahead with your question, please.
Or I'll just come down.
Oh.
First of all, thank you very much to all the candidates here who came and are participating. Thank you to Montgomery College and the Student Senate for organizing this. My name is George Zockel, and I'm a candidate for the Maryland House of Delegates here in District 20, which covers Montgomery College. And my question is going to cover the issues of immigration, LGBT rights, and also access to internet resources. My blood's boiling today. I had a friend call me yesterday to inform me that his friend, who I may or may not know, and right now I don't want to know if I know him, on Sunday evening, 2 gay men were walking on the 10th and U intersection in Washington, D.C., and they were attacked. There's actually a video of this online at Fox 5. So my question is this. If that were to happen here in Maryland, right here in District 20, and the witnesses who videotaped it were at-risk immigrants of deportation, what would you do to create an online reporting system to allow those immigrants, perhaps student immigrants from Montgomery College, be able to report that hate crime without the risk of deportation?
Well, thank you, George, for the question. And hopefully you've heard Ben reference for attacking me for supporting increasing some of the maximum sentences and the funding for anti-violence programs also included a provision that would provide protections for immigrants, undocumented immigrants who come forward and are witnesses for crimes. So we did make progress on that. It was part of the Trust Act last year that shamefully didn't pass, even though I and many others, including your colleagues who represent this district, fought very hard for, much against the opposition to the governor and his strong and vocal misrepresentation of that important legislation. We've made progress on that in Annapolis. I am very proud to have stood for the immigrant community, and of course for the LGBT community, as the first openly gay person there, to push for hate crimes laws and many of the things that we have that provide added protections for our community.
May I? Thank you. So as a prosecutor who's very frequently relied on undocumented citizens as victims or witnesses, I've countless times had to certify their status as a helpful witness or victim under the U visa program, which provides a visa, an semi-indefinite visa under federal law, which is now additionally protected in state law, and worked with advocates to make sure all the documentation is in place and making sure that they have all the protection that we can provide in Maryland so that they can stay and participate. That's one part of the answer to your question. Another part is how do we provide mechanisms so that, especially if something is on videotape, how do we avoid them having to be part of the court process altogether? Because I think that was part of your question. And so one of the things that the Attorney General's office that we did is create a hate crimes hotline so that anyone can call in, and we have lawyers staffing it. I would take days of staffing it, other lawyers throughout the office, so that anyone can call in and we can take the information and make an analysis of what should we do with this information and how can we work with law enforcement. And so if, for instance, something is captured on video and it's verifiable in some way other than the recording.
Could those numbers be traced?
Yeah, well, the Attorney General's office has their numbers. There's also other reporting mechanisms, but yes, they could, they happily would provide it. But it is dependent on people reaching out and reporting the information. So it's not even close to a perfect catalog of all the hate crime that goes on in the state. I wouldn't ever want to suggest that, but at least it's a way of that office responding to those issues and trying to do the best job possible protecting victims.
If I could just jump in, because it does make my blood boil too, because this is where on a few of the issues that you've talked about, Governor Hogan's silence is exactly why I believe that there is a clear lack of leadership. But the overarching point I think that you also kind of allude to is that in this climate of where particularly immigrants are being silenced, what we need to do is step forth, put forth protections particularly for them, which is why as governor, I will guarantee you that no law enforcement officer will be deputized into Trump and Sessions' army in his war on immigrants. But likewise, that in terms of citizens who are just simply trying to do the right thing, to make sure that some of the most vulnerable of our populations do not get attacked, this is where I do think that we need to be far more creative. It's why last week when I rolled out a community policing plan on the 3rd anniversary of Freddie Gray, part of my point was it can't just be about a phone line. It's got to be about recognizing that 911 in 2018 has to allow for other ways in which citizens can engage, whether that is providing pictures, videos. You see people already doing that and putting that onto the internet. Why shouldn't there be a direct communication channel to police? And that's actually a policy that we put forth.
If a politician feels compelled to tell you that they voted to increase mass incarceration in order to get protections for hate crimes, they don't understand that mass incarceration itself is a hate crime. I'm tired of false choices. And the reality is that it starts with having courage. Protecting people, making sure this is a safe state starts with having courage. As president of the NAACP, sat down on the first day of Chad Griffin's job at HRC to put together the strategy to make sure that marriage equality passed in the ballot because it looked like it was about to fail. And we turned it around. When I left the NAACP, I led a trans equality march in Jackson, Mississippi, because it was the right thing to do. And when I'm governor, you can plan on me to pass the Trust Act, so our immigrants can stop living in fear every day here. Because right now in Maryland, there are places where law enforcement is totally distracted because they've signed up to also be agents of immigration. And the so-called sanctuary states movement, sanctuary cities movement, the right to, started with a conservative police chief in Los Angeles, Daryl Gates, of Rodney King infamy, who stood up to the INS then and said, oh, thank you, but no, I'm not going to become a deputy of immigration because I have one job. It's to keep people safe. And the day that I do that, I have two. And we become less safe because my guys are distracted being deputies of immigration. Because the immigrants stop talking to us, not just the ones who lack papers, like all of them, and we stop getting the information that we need. And because those criminal networks begin preying on those immigrant groups, especially because they don't talk to us. Well, tonight in Maryland, all those things are happening somewhere in our state. And we have to have the courage to stand up and stop it.
Thank you. We're going to go to Rashini, and then we'll come back to this side. You two will be the last questions, because we do want to have time for refreshments outside and give people a chance to shake hands and meet the candidates more on a more personal level.
All right, so this is a student Senate question. One of the main issues affecting Maryland and the entire country is climate change. If elected governor, what actions would you take in order to reduce our carbon footprint and make sure that generations to come do not suffer from the consequences of inaction? Thank you.
So if I can touch on that, because this is actually a plan we just rolled out today. Our plan is comprehensive in the sense that we know that this is an incredibly complex problem that we can truly solve. But we should have taken action yesterday and the day before. But as my father said, take the next day you possibly can. That's where we have to do it today. What I want to see is us do a few different things. First, on climate action, the fact that our governor sat silent after President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Treaty for over 7 to 8 months is a lack of leadership. You had Republican and Democratic governors across the state sign up to the Climate Alliance when Hogan didn't. And that's where I want to make sure that we have to lead the charge at the state level, because we know that Pruitt and Zinke are not going to at the national level. But part of it is also recognizing that we have opportunities like RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiatives, where before Hogan came into power, we were actually leading the charge in many respects through that. But part of it is also knowing that clean energy has to be a critical piece of this. Maryland consumes more energy than we produce, which means that we export our dollars and we import pollution. We have the highest number of deaths caused by air pollution in any state in the nation. And that's where investing in offshore wind and solar energy is a critical part of what we need to do.
So we will be putting out our plan the next week, and I'm very excited because we have had a lot of really amazing people who have been leaders in the environmental movement in Maryland work on it. But on the issue of climate change, one of the key things we need to do in Maryland is we need to be a national leader, and we need to commit to 100% clean energy. But that's not easy. It's easy to say, it's very hard to do. And it means having a plan that we start immediately on day one, outlining exactly how we're going to get there. It means our defunct coal facilities. We have a plan to find alternative jobs for the people who work there, and a plan to slowly close them across the state of Maryland. It means being a leader in wind energy. We are right now in competition with China as a country. There's no reason that Maryland can't be an answer in that competitive battle. We could be the leaders. We have the education, we have the workforce, we have the technology at our fingertips. Bethlehem Steel, for instance, could be repurposed as a great manufacturer, an international manufacturer of wind technology. So it's both having the smart people who know how to get it done. It's about having a governor who has the commitment and the vision and the relationships to stay the course and actually get it done and not just take on industry, but make partnerships with industry so that everyone is working together and understands the benefit for Marylanders in terms of jobs, in terms of the environment, and in terms of bringing innovation to the state. So I'm very excited about our very aggressive plan in that area. And also, I just want to say again, the record that Rashern has in Prince George's County is one of the strongest in the state of Maryland on the environment. And it's because he made it a priority from day one, created a Department of the Environment, found the best person he could find, and said, please, I want us to be a leader. How do we get there? And 8 years later, we've seen that. So thank you.
If you go to alecross.com, we do have a white paper on the website going into a lot more detail about where we stand on climate change and the plans that we have. I will say just 3 different points from it. One is Montgomery County actually has a green bank, which encourages businesses, helps businesses and residents to be able to borrow money to do projects like installing solar panels, et cetera. That is something that we want to create statewide, is creating that green bank. I also think, focusing on encouraging clean technology industries to grow. It's not just an environmental thing, it's also an economic thing. We need to be able to grow those industries to create more jobs for people in the state. And the other thing too is also installing a bunch more electric charging stations. A lot of folks won't necessarily buy electric cars because they are afraid they're gonna, quote, run out of gas, which is because there's not enough charging stations around the state. So installing a bunch more of those around the state will encourage that type of purchase.
It's nice having this conversation at a Democratic event because the one thing that we all agree on is we actually believe in science, right? We actually believe that it's human interaction which is causing climate change. So at least we start at that elevated stance. Look, getting to that 100% goal is essential. There are a variety of ways to get it. There's parts about what's clean, renewable, what should come in state, out of state. Those are the types of decisions you have to wrestle with when governing. The important thing to note with Larry Hogan is when we passed the bill to get us to 25%, he vetoed that. And we had to override that veto. So at least we're going to 25%. At least we created a pathway to get more Marylanders involved in renewable energy and those clean jobs. And we specifically looked at how we got more people of color, more minority and women-owned businesses to get involved in that growing field. So I'm very proud of that record. And if you want to be able to improve on that, first of all, elect one of us. There's no question, because we are going to work harder and move harder and push harder than Larry Hogan is never going to do. If you want to make progress in getting it done in Maryland, I think I'm the one that has the track record that demonstrates of how to get it done and can get it done in the future.
Germany's already at 40% clean and renewable energy. Just like Georgia's already cut their prison system by 30%. And here in Maryland, we fight to get to 25% as a goal for some years from now on clean and renewable energy. On mass incarceration, we call it a victory when we hope to get, what is it, Rich, 10 years from now, cut 1,000 beds or 5% of our prisons? We gotta move faster. Our children need us to move faster. Our planet needs us to move faster. It's not just about setting goals, it's knowing how to lead the people of the state to actually accomplish those goals more quickly. And that's why I've done it again and again, and that's why the Baltimore Sun named me Marylander of the Year. The day that I've been endorsed by Friends of the Earth, I've been endorsed by the Environmental Defense Fund, the day I was endorsed by 350 Action, Rich was endorsed by a union that promotes the building of pipelines, and both of us are against it. But the folks who want to build them endorsed him. Bill McKibben called me the greenest candidate of 2018, because I've never met a pipeline I don't like. And I made it very clear we will not build new gas infrastructure in this state when I am governor. And we will move as quickly as possible to 100% clean and renewable energy. And that means catching up with Germany quickly and moving further, faster. It does not mean celebrating, setting a goal of 25% when we're already leading behind our peers around, when we're already lagging behind our peers around the world.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that these last two questions, I know you've been waiting, are short,
Yes.
and that the answers are really short. So everybody has a chance to go out and have some refreshments and mingle a little bit.
Hello, my name is Simon Molina, and this question is about gun control. So I would like to ask, what are you guys the plans to ban assault weapons in the state of Maryland, and what are the ideas that you guys have for now?
Well, thankfully for the strong leadership of Attorney General Brian Frosh, when he was a member of the state Senate, with the support of many of us, myself, Congressman Raskin, then Senator, now Congressman Raskin, we have a military-style assault weapons ban in Maryland. We have a limit on high-capacity magazines in our state to 10. This year we passed the strongest anti-trigger activization law, the bump stock, what we saw in Las Vegas. We banned that in Maryland. We need to go farther. We need to get as many guns off the street as possible. I have a great record on pushing for these issues. We'll continue to push for these issues because gun violence prevention is essential. And trust me, myself, none of these people are going to have an A- from the NRA like Larry Hogan has.
Anyone
Can I
else?
just add very quickly? Exactly. Maryland is lucky, thanks to great legislators, to have among the strongest gun laws in the country. So assault weapons are almost universally banned. I'm not saying there's not small improvements, but as a general matter, Maryland has great laws. The problem is Maryland guns are not limited to only being manufactured in Maryland. In fact, I think Beretta is now left, so no guns are manufactured in Maryland. And most of the guns used in crimes, the overwhelming majority, come from other states that have very weak laws. So we need a government who's going to lead with other states, both to fight at the national level, but also to partner with states to go after the problem as a collective bunch. And it shouldn't just be our Attorney General, right? We should have a governor who's leading in that.
And I would just add, because the truth is, it is a national issue where Maryland should be leading the charge. We do have some strong laws on the books, but the truth is we've got to build. We can't just sit on our laurels. And part of it is making sure that every gun that is sold in the state of Maryland is licensed and insured. If you have to do that with your cars, it doesn't make sense to me that you don't have to with your guns. But likewise, we need to make sure that we recognize that in Maryland, on the issue of bump stocks, Governor Hogan's response was, well, no individual in Maryland had ever been killed by a bump stock. Well, no one had ever been killed in Las Vegas before it was used in a mass killing. And our laws have to be preventative. They can't be reactive. But then the only other thing I would add is that true leadership is recognizing that we have to rule on this in the region, because half of the guns that come into Maryland and are confiscated are actually crossing our borders from neighboring states. And so that's where recognizing that if you were to apply Massachusetts' laws across the country, you would go from 30,000 deaths to 3,000. And this is the kind of issue where Maryland has to lead the charge for the sake of our children.
So I'll be real quick because I agree with what everyone has said up here. Did you know that you can buy guns and ammunition in Maryland and only pay the regular 6% sales tax? But if you buy beer, you pay 9%. That's a quick, we should be taxing ammunition and guns using our sales tax mechanism, adding more revenue from that. We can use that to invest in mental health programs and safety programs. So.
So I would associate with everything, myself with all the comments up here. But I say additionally, we've got to shut down the AR-15 loophole in our assault weapons ban. Somebody tells you that they need an they need an AR-15 to hunt deer, they don't know how to hunt deer. It's only used for killing people, and we shouldn't be able to buy them in our state. We have to set up a task force amongst our state police to stop the flow of guns into our state. We had a high school student in this county. Gun at school, AR-15 at home, multiple hand grenades. We gotta do much better. My son's kindergarten was on lockdown. We gotta do much better. We gotta act much faster. We need a red flag law to get guns out of the hands of people who are known to be a harm to themselves or others. And we gotta get more counselors and psychologists and social workers into our schools. They keep telling us that these kids have mental health issues, and that the solution is we need more guns in our schools. We need more counselors in our schools.
Thank you. We only have time for two more questions, and they need to be one more question. We need to be really fast, so I'm sorry.
This is, I guess, a two-part. The first part is one of the few politicians I could, that I could actually respect and admire was the former mayor of Baltimore, Kurt Schmoke. In addition to being having the courage that he was one of the first politicians to call for an end to the contraband prohibition laws about 30 years ago, which are the #1 reason of the crime and the threats in Maryland. Now, this is what Mayor Schmoke did to deserve our honor is he sent his police chief and top lieutenants to Amsterdam to learn how a civilized society does policing. You don't need to give us blue ribbon commissions that give reports that are never acted on. Just go and don't reinvent the wheel, do the same thing what Mayor Schmoke did. Now, unfortunately, his predecessor, that vain, arrogant creature, Martin O'Malley, the first thing he did when he became mayor of Baltimore, he staged a crack buy at a crack house. As soon as he made the purchase, he snaps his fingers, signals the police, and the SWAT team and the TV cameras to film the raid to make him look like he's tough on crime. Now, I don't have any, for example, Hogan's not my hero, but if the Democrats ran O'Malley against Hogan, I would have to say the lesser of the two is Hogan in that case. And we can't just be blindly partisan when our own is making these, are running creatures like that. The other thing was, the biggest predatory threat in Maryland, and since I had to move down to PG County because of the insanity. The biggest predatory threat for any of us is sitting on the wall of our own house in the form of this allegedly smart meter, otherwise known as the meter of death. Now, for 5 years or so, we've tried to have grassroots efforts to allow a free opt-out against this technology, which was designed as a weaponized frequency and performs as it was designed. If anybody has a bed, somebody in your home has a bed 6 feet or closer from the wall with that meter, it's not if there'll be a cancer, heart attack, or stroke, it's when. And unfortunately, the delegate, Derek Davis, has been, even though the entire committee wants to have a vote on this to allow it, he has tabled it as a committee chairman and not allowed this to be voted on. Now, you can imagine which industry funds his campaign. So we have utilities like Smeco
We're out of time here.
behaving like it's a plantation
Please,
from
sir,
100 years
I
ago.
feel like you're making a speech.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't even hear a question in there.
Well, the question was, is there any way that we can have this voted on and allow redress and change the conflict of interest so we don't have to have this technology? There's no reason analog meters, they work. They don't kill people.
We got it.
Yeah.
Anybody have a real quick answer to that?
And the NRA didn't put those on our wall.
So on the first question, I'm proud to be the lead sponsor of the bill to legalize the recreational use of marijuana in our state, to end the prohibition on it, and in fact, reinvest the money that would be coming from the tax on marijuana into the communities in our state that have been hardest hit by the failed war on drugs. It's time for us to move forward, and I think a sensible drug policy includes legalizing marijuana for the adult use. My daughter just applauded for adult use. For adult use of marijuana. I'm going to be very, very clear on that. And she's only 14. That's what I was. And then, yes. And then on the other issue, on the smart meter issue, I do think that is an issue that the Public Service Commission is appropriately designed to address.
Okay, I will take this last question. Making sure.
Hello. My name's Akira. I just want to ask this quick question. Why are we beating around the bush with immigration laws? Like, we keep trying to find the wrong solution to protect immigrants who built this country. They're treating us like we're not like part of this country, and it's kind of like they have no problem taking our tax money. So why can't you guys look out for us? Ronald Reagan, a Republican, legalized immigration. So as Democrats, what's going on? I'm tired of hearing policies okay, the SAFE Act that didn't pass. Who's looking out for us, for the families who are, who are immigrants? My question is what are you gonna do for me and my family to help them become citizens?
I have been involved in the fight for comprehensive immigration reform for well over a decade. I've fasted with Latino civil rights leaders in front of the White House and the Congress trying to get these passed. Only person here to go to jail in front of Trump's White House. I was down there defending our dreamers. Co-chaired the campaign to pass the DREAM Act in our state. We have to build a movement to take back our country if we're going to get real, because this is handled by the federal government. And that begins with taking back our states. And as I started off saying in the beginning, you want to make Trump's blood pressure go up, send a civil rights leader to be your next governor. I'm not running to lead politicians, I'm running to lead the people of the state. And one of the best things we can do with the people of this state is to get them to see what they have in common. The first person in my family to move to Maryland, we believe, was a guy named George Willard, who moved here shortly after helping found the Salem colony in 1624. He didn't have papers there, he didn't have papers here. The reality is that when the color of immigrants changed, if you will, value to the country didn't change. So we've got to stand up with courage and with humility to understand that many of our families didn't come here through some official process, that we all were able to contribute, to make sure that your family can contribute and not have to live in terror.
Thank you.
So, thanks. So, elected official, I have fought to make sure that everyone has access to a driver's license. I have fought to make sure we implemented the DREAM Act. I've fought to make sure that our schools are open, our communities are open, and as your governor, I will be down there fighting for a comprehensive immigration reform. We need to have it. We need to find a way to, however you want to describe it, opening the doors. I mean, Ronald Reagan didn't legalize immigration, but Ronald Reagan did move forward with an amnesty program that allowed people that were here to get documentation. We need to recognize our reality and do that. But that is a federal issue, but that is a federal issue that gets moved forward when you have strong leaders at the state level who are fighting to get that done and explaining why it is good for our communities and good for the country.
Just real quick. Yes, again, agree with everything you guys are saying. It's a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. We do need to make sure that we are creating a culture of welcoming people and encouraging people to be here. And you're right, immigrants built this country. They're still building this country. It is absolutely important that whoever's leading in Annapolis is encouraging folks to come here, and we're protecting them and keeping them safe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We are a country of immigrants. None of us would, probably very few people in this room have ancestors who were born here. I think there's three things, right? It's been touched on. This is a federal issue fundamentally. So what can states do? Number one, we can protect immigrants from federal predation, and that means not just our attorney general suing the federal government, but having a governor that is also part of that effort. So we're suing the government to make sure we're protecting existing laws, not that they're deeply flawed, but at least protecting them as they currently exist so they don't get worse. Number two, it's making sure, as has been touched on, that we are not in Maryland deputizing and supporting unlawful immigration actions at all. We should not be involved in the immigration process. We should not be supporting deportation. We should be protecting our citizens in Maryland. And number three, we need to be working with our federal legislators and doing everything possible to make sure that we as a state are working collaboratively with federal partners and state partners. And sorry, I just thought of a really important fourth one, maybe the most important of all, forgive me, is we have to make sure we get the census right. Rashern Baker in Prince George's County recently joined the National NAACP and Yale Law students to sue the census because their argument, which is absolutely correct, is that the design of the census, current design, is designed to undercount Democrats, people of color, people who live in states that didn't vote for Donald Trump. And so we need to continue that. Hopefully that lawsuit will be effective, but if it's not, we in Maryland have to protect and make sure that we are doing the counting properly so that everyone is represented in the state of Maryland.
So, this is a personal issue for me. I'm the only candidate in the field who's actually an immigrant herself. And part of why I decided to run was knowing, coming out of the White House and seeing how xenophobic and anti-immigrant and completely full of hatred and vitriol this president is, that if my family had tried to come today instead of in 1980, I know we wouldn't be allowed in this country. And I know that today there are families just like ours who want to work hard, who want to make sure that they take their families to a place where they can raise them in safety and security. And they want to earn a living, pay taxes, and do the right thing. And that is what our country has been based on. As I said when I started, it is the strength of our nation. It is the strength of our state. It is why we are called America in miniature. And part of what they are doing at the national level is on a range of areas trying to disempower us. And so what I want to do first and foremost is, as governor, when Sessions and Nielsen come to Baltimore and try to attack immigrants as gang members, stand up and speak out. When he passes laws that try to have us hide in the shadows, make sure that the law and government stand up for us. And as we see citizens who are taking the cue from this idiot president, we need to have someone who is going to give voice to those voices that are not heard, because they are American voices and they need protection more than ever today.
I want to thank you all so much for sharing this information and the expertise that you have with us today, for coming here. I'm really impressed by no mudslinging. Everybody stayed on topic. You don't make the word politician have a positive connotation. So we really appreciate it. Can we have a applause? campus. I hope some of you can stay for that and shake some hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.